Introduction: The Power of Inner Healing. There comes a moment in every human life when the noise of the outside world fades just enough for us to hear something deeper, a quiet, persistent voice within. It does not shout, yet it refuses to be ignored. It speaks through our fatigue, our confusion, our repeated patterns, and sometimes through our pain. It asks simple but profound questions. Who am I, beneath everything I have been told? Why do I feel this way? Is there a path to peace that does not depend on changing everything around me? This book begins in that moment, when you are ready, even if uncertain, to turn inward. We live in a world that teaches us to look outward for solutions. From a young age, we are conditioned to seek validation, success, and happiness in external achievements, grades, careers, possessions, approval from others. While these things may bring temporary satisfaction, they often fail to address a deeper truth. What we carry inside shapes how we experience everything outside. If there is unrest within, no amount of external success can fully silence it. And if there is peace within, even the most difficult circumstances become more bearable, more meaningful, and sometimes even transformative. Inner healing is not a trend, nor is it a luxury reserved for a select few. It is a fundamental human need. It is the process of returning to yourself, of gently uncovering the wounds, beliefs, and emotional patterns that have been formed over time, often without your conscious awareness. It is not about blaming the past, but about understanding it. It is not about becoming perfect, but about becoming whole.
One of the greatest gifts that God has given humanity is the ability to think, to reflect, and to heal. The human mind is not only capable of storing pain, but also of transforming it. Within you exists a remarkable capacity for renewal. Even after hardship, loss, or disappointment, there is a part of you that remains untouched, a core that is resilient, aware, and capable of growth. Inner healing is the journey of reconnecting with that part. Yet this journey is not always easy. It requires courage, the courage to face what you may have avoided, to sit with emotions that are uncomfortable, and to question beliefs that once felt certain. It asks you to slow down in a world that constantly pushes you to move faster. It invites you to listen when you have been taught to ignore. And perhaps most importantly, it asks you to be honest with yourself, about yourself, and for yourself. Many people misunderstand healing as something that happens quickly, as if it were a problem to be fixed or a task to be completed. But true inner healing is not linear. It does not follow a straight path, nor does it have a clear finish line. It is a process, sometimes gentle, sometimes challenging, always meaningful. There will be days of clarity and peace, and there will be moments of doubt and resistance. Both are part of the journey. Both are necessary. In this book, we will explore the layers of your inner world, the thoughts that shape your reality, the emotions that guide your behavior, and the experiences that have left their mark on your heart. We will look at how pain can be stored in subtle ways, influencing your choices and relationships without you realizing it. And more importantly, we will discover how awareness, compassion, and intentional practice can begin to release that pain.
You will not be asked to become someone else. On the contrary, you will be guided to rediscover who you already are beneath the conditioning, the fear, and the expectations. You will learn to observe your thoughts without being controlled by them, to feel your emotions without being overwhelmed by them, and to respond to life with greater clarity and balance. Inner healing is deeply personal, yet it connects us all. Every person you meet is carrying something unseen, memories, struggles, hopes, and silent battles. As you begin to heal yourself, you naturally become more understanding, more patient, and more compassionate toward others. Healing is not only an individual act, it is a contribution to the world. A healed person creates less harm, spreads more kindness, and inspires others to begin their own journey. It is also important to understand that healing does not mean the absence of pain. Pain is a natural part of life. What changes through healing is your relationship with that pain. Instead of resisting it or being defined by it, you learn to understand it, to listen to what it is trying to teach you, and to move through it with awareness. In this way, pain becomes not an enemy, but a guide, a signal pointing toward areas within you that need attention, care, and love. As you move through the pages of this book, you are invited to take your time. There is no rush. Some ideas may resonate immediately, while others may take time to fully understand. That is perfectly okay. Healing unfolds at its own pace, and your journey will be unique to you. You may find yourself reflecting deeply, remembering things you had forgotten, or seeing your life from a new perspective. You may feel inspired, challenged, or even uncomfortable at times. All of these responses are part of the process. Growth rarely happens in complete comfort, but it always leads to a greater sense of freedom. This book is not here to give you all the answers, but to help you ask better questions. It is not here to change who you are, but to help you see yourself more clearly. And most importantly, it is here to remind you that healing is possible, no matter where you are starting from. Within you lies a quiet strength, a wisdom that has been waiting to be heard. As you begin this journey of inner healing, you are not becoming someone new. You are returning to yourself.
Chapter 1. The Beginning Within. There's a silent truth that many people spend their entire lives avoiding. Everything you seek externally has a root within you. The peace you long for, the clarity you chase, the happiness you hope to find in future achievements or relationships, these are not distant destinations. They are inner states, waiting to be discovered, cultivated, and understood. Yet, for most of us, the journey inward begins only when something disrupts the illusion that everything outside us will eventually make us whole. This disruption can take many forms. It may come as a deep disappointment, a broken relationship, a failure that shakes your confidence, or simply a quiet realization that despite having what you once wanted, something still feels missing. It is in these moments that life gently, or sometimes forcefully, invites you to pause and look within, not to judge yourself, but to understand yourself. From a young age, we are taught how to navigate the external world, how to speak, behave, achieve, and succeed. But rarely are we taught how to understand our inner world. We are not shown how to process emotions, how to question our thoughts, or how to sit with ourselves in silence. As a result, many people grow up disconnected from their own feelings, driven by patterns they do not fully understand, and searching for answers in places that can never truly satisfy them. The beginning of inner healing is awareness. It is the moment you start to observe yourself instead of automatically reacting. You begin to notice your thoughts, how quickly they judge, compare, and criticize. You start to recognize your emotional patterns, how certain situations trigger fear, anger, or sadness in ways that seem disproportionate. And perhaps most importantly, you begin to ask, where is this coming from? This question is powerful. It shifts your focus from the surface to the source. Instead of blaming circumstances or other people, you start to explore the deeper layers within you. You begin to see that many of your reactions are not about the present moment, but about past experiences that have shaped your perception of reality. Every human being carries a story, not just the story they tell others, but the one they tell themselves. This inner narrative is formed over years through childhood experiences, interactions with family, successes, failures, and the countless small moments that leave an emotional imprint. These experiences create beliefs, often unconscious, about who you are and what the world is like. You may have learned, without realizing it, that you are not good enough, that you must always prove your worth, that love is conditional, or that expressing your true self is unsafe. These beliefs do not always appear clearly in your thoughts, but they influence your decisions, your relationships, and your sense of self in profound ways. Inner healing begins when you bring these hidden beliefs into the light, not to criticize yourself for having them, but to understand how they were formed. Most of these patterns were created as a form of protection. At some point in your life, they helped you cope, adapt, or survive. But what once protected you may now be limiting you. This is where compassion becomes essential. You cannot heal what you judge harshly. If you approach your inner world with criticism and impatience, you will only create more resistance. But if you approach it with curiosity and kindness, you create space for transformation. Imagine speaking to yourself the way you would speak to someone you deeply care about, with understanding, patience, and a genuine desire to help rather than to blame. This shift may seem simple, but it is one of the most powerful steps in the healing process.
Another important aspect of beginning this journey is learning to sit with yourself. In a world filled with constant distraction, phones, social media, endless noise, it can feel uncomfortable to be alone with your thoughts. Silence often brings to the surface what has been buried. But this is not something to fear, it is something to welcome. When you allow yourself moments of stillness, you begin to reconnect with your inner voice, the one that is not driven by fear or conditioning, but by awareness and truth. At first, this voice may be faint, easily overshadowed by louder, more familiar patterns of thinking, but with time and attention, it becomes clearer. You may start to notice that not every thought you have is true. Just because your mind tells you something does not mean it reflects reality. Thoughts are influenced by past experiences, emotions, and learned patterns. When you begin to observe them instead of immediately believing them, you create distance, and in that distance you find freedom. The same is true for emotions. Emotions are not problems to be fixed, they are signals to be understood. Each emotion carries information about your inner state. Fear may point to a perceived threat, sadness to a sense of loss, anger to a boundary that feels violated. When you listen to these signals instead of suppressing them, you gain insight into what you truly need. However, listening does not mean being controlled. Inner healing is about balance, feeling your emotions without being overwhelmed by them, observing your thoughts without being trapped in them. It is about becoming aware of your inner experience while maintaining the ability to choose how you respond. As you begin this process, you may uncover parts of yourself that you have ignored or hidden. This can be challenging. You may encounter pain, regret, or unresolved emotions. But this is not a sign that something is wrong. It is a sign that something is being released.
Healing requires honesty. It asks you to see yourself clearly, without denial or exaggeration, to acknowledge both your strengths and your struggles, to accept that you are a work in progress, as every human being is. At the same time, it is important to remember that you are not defined by your past. Your experiences have shaped you, but they do not have to limit you. With awareness, you gain the ability to choose differently. You are no longer reacting unconsciously. You are responding with intention. This is the true beginning, the moment you realize that change does not start outside, but within, that your inner world is not something to escape from, but something to understand and nurture, that healing is not about becoming perfect, but about becoming aware. As you move forward, you may not have all the answers. You may still feel uncertain at times, but what matters is that you have taken the first step, the step of turning inward. And once that step is taken, everything begins to change. Chapter 2. Understanding your inner world. Before you can heal, you must understand, not just on the surface, but deeply, honestly, patiently, and without judgment. Your inner world is not random or chaotic, even if it sometimes feels that way. It is structured, shaped over time by your experiences, your environment, your beliefs, and the meaning you have given to everything you have lived through. To begin true inner healing, you must learn how this inner world operates. Your inner world is made up of three essential elements: your thoughts, your emotions, and your beliefs. These are constantly interacting with each other, creating the way you perceive reality. They influence how you see yourself, how you interpret situations, and how you respond to life. Most of the time, this process happens automatically, without your awareness. But once you begin to observe it, everything starts to make sense. Let us begin with thoughts. Thoughts are powerful, yet often misunderstood. Many people assume that their thoughts are facts, that whatever appears in their mind must be true. But in reality, thoughts are interpretations. They are shaped by your past experiences, your fears, your expectations, and even your mood in the present moment. For example, two people can experience the same situation and think completely different thoughts about it. One may see failure, while the other sees opportunity. One may feel rejected, while the other feels indifferent. The situation itself does not create the experience. Your interpretation does. This realization is important because it gives you power. If your thoughts are not absolute truths, then you do not have to be controlled by them. You can question them, observe them, and eventually reshape them. But this begins with awareness, simply noticing what you were thinking without immediately reacting. Next are your emotions. Emotions are often more intense than thoughts, and for this reason many people try to avoid or suppress them. But emotions are not your enemies. They are messages. They arise in response to your thoughts and experiences, and they carry valuable information about your inner state. When you feel anxious, something inside you perceives uncertainty or danger. When you feel sad, there is a sense of loss or unmet need. When you feel anger, it often signals that a boundary has been crossed or that something feels unjust. Each emotion has a purpose. The problem is not the emotion itself, but how you relate to it. Some people become overwhelmed by their emotions, allowing them to take control. Others disconnect from their emotions completely, avoiding them at all costs. Neither approach leads to healing. The key is to feel your emotions without being consumed by them, to allow them to exist, to listen to what they are telling you, and then to respond with awareness rather than impulse. The third element, beliefs, is perhaps the most influential, yet the least visible. Beliefs are the deep assumptions you hold about yourself, others, and the world. Unlike thoughts, which come and go, beliefs are more stable. They operate in the background, shaping your thoughts and emotions in subtle but powerful ways. If you believe that you are not worthy, your thoughts will often reflect self-doubt, and your emotions may include insecurity or fear of rejection. If you believe that people cannot be trusted, you may constantly feel guarded, even in safe situations. These beliefs are not always conscious. In fact, many of them are formed early in life and remain unexamined for years. Inner healing requires that you bring these beliefs into awareness. You begin to ask, what do I truly believe about myself? Where did this belief come from? Is it absolutely true, or is it something I learned and never questioned? This process can be uncomfortable because beliefs often feel like reality. But when you look closely, you may discover that many of your limiting beliefs were formed during moments when you did not have the full understanding or perspective you have now. You may have interpreted a situation in a certain way as a child and carried that interpretation into adulthood without realizing it. Understanding your inner world also means recognizing patterns. Patterns are repeated ways of thinking, feeling, and behaving. You may notice that you react the same way in similar situations, or that certain types of experiences keep repeating in your life. These patterns are not coincidences. They are expressions of your inner programming. For example, you may find yourself repeatedly drawn to relationships that make you feel unappreciated, or you may avoid opportunities because of a fear of failure. These patterns often reflect underlying beliefs and unresolved emotions. Once you become aware of them, you can begin to change them. But awareness alone is not enough. It must be accompanied by patience. Your inner world was not created in a day, and it will not transform overnight. Healing is a gradual process of observation, understanding, and gentle change.
It is also important to approach this process with honesty, not harsh honesty that leads to self-criticism, but clear honesty that leads to understanding. You are not trying to prove that something is wrong with you. You are trying to understand why you are the way you are. At the same time, you must let go of the need to control everything inside you. The goal is not to eliminate all negative thoughts or emotions. That is neither realistic nor necessary. The goal is to develop a healthier relationship with your inner experience, to become less reactive, more aware, and more intentional. As you continue this journey, you may begin to notice subtle changes. You may catch yourself before reacting automatically. You may question a thought that you once believed without hesitation. You may feel an emotion fully without trying to escape it. These small moments are significant. They are signs that you are becoming more conscious of your inner world. And with this consciousness comes freedom. Not the freedom of having no challenges, but the freedom of not being unconsciously controlled by them. You begin to realize that while you cannot always control what happens to you, you can influence how you experience it. Understanding your inner world is not the end of the journey, it is the foundation. Without this understanding, any attempt at change will be temporary, but with it, you create a solid base for true, lasting healing. You are no longer a passive observer of your life. You are becoming an active participant in your own transformation.
Chapter 3: The Roots of Emotional Pain. Every emotion you feel has a history. It may appear suddenly, triggered by a moment, a word, or a memory, but its roots often go much deeper than the present situation. Emotional pain is rarely created in the moment it is felt. It is awakened. To truly heal, you must begin to understand not only what you feel, but where it comes from. Many people try to deal with emotional pain at the surface level. They distract themselves, ignore their feelings, or attempt to replace negative emotions with positive thinking. While these strategies may offer temporary relief, they do not address the underlying cause. The pain remains, waiting for another moment to resurface. This is why certain feelings seem to repeat themselves, even when the circumstances are different. At the root of emotional pain are unmet needs, unresolved experiences, and interpretations formed in moments when you were most vulnerable. These moments are often found in early life, but they are not limited to childhood. Any experience that leaves a strong emotional impact can create a lasting imprint within you. As a child, you experience the world with limited understanding but deep sensitivity. You depended on others for safety, love, and validation. When these needs were not fully met, or when you experienced criticism, rejection, neglect, or instability, you may have formed emotional responses as a way to cope. These responses were not wrong. They were intelligent adaptations to your environment. For example, if you felt unseen or unheard, you may have learned to suppress your voice. If you experienced rejection, you may have developed a fear of being abandoned. If you were frequently criticized, you may have internalized a belief that you were not good enough. These patterns were not conscious choices. They were protective mechanisms designed to help you navigate your reality at the time.
The problem is not that these mechanisms were created. The problem is that they often remain active long after they are needed. What once protected you may now limit you. You may find yourself reacting to present situations with emotions that belong to the past without realizing it. This is why some reactions feel stronger than the situation seems to justify. A small disagreement may trigger intense anger. A minor mistake may lead to overwhelming self-criticism. A moment of distance from someone you care about may create deep anxiety. These reactions are not random. They are connected to earlier experiences that have not been fully processed or understood. Emotional pain is often stored in layers. The surface layer is what you feel in the present moment. Beneath that are deeper layers of memory, belief, and unresolved emotion. Healing requires that you move gently through these layers, not forcing anything, but allowing yourself to explore with curiosity and patience. One of the most important steps in this process is recognizing that your pain is valid. Many people minimize their own experiences, comparing their struggles to others and concluding that they should not feel this way. But pain is not a competition. What matters is not how your experience compares to someone else's, but how it affected you. When you acknowledge your pain without judgment, you create space for healing. You allow yourself to feel what has been suppressed, to understand what has been ignored, and to give attention to what has been neglected. Another key aspect of understanding emotional pain is recognizing the role of memory. Memory is not only something you recall consciously, it also exists in your body and your emotional responses. Sometimes you may not remember a specific event clearly, but the emotional imprint remains. A certain tone of voice, a situation, or even a feeling can trigger a response without an obvious explanation.
This does not mean something is wrong with you. It means your mind and body are trying to process something that has not yet been resolved. Instead of resisting these moments, you can begin to observe them. Ask yourself gently, what does this feeling remind me of? When have I felt this before? You may not always find a clear answer immediately, and that is okay. The goal is not to force understanding, but to open the door to it. It is also important to understand that emotional pain often carries messages. Beneath anger, there may be hurt. Beneath fear, there may be a need for safety. Beneath sadness, there may be a longing for connection. When you look beyond the surface of your emotions, you begin to see what they are trying to communicate. For example, if you feel intense frustration in a relationship, it may not only be about the present situation. It may reflect a deeper need to be respected or understood, needs that may not have been fully met in the past. When you recognize this, your focus shifts from reacting to understanding. Healing does not mean erasing the past. It means changing your relationship with it. Your experiences are part of your story, but they do not have to control your present. By bringing awareness to the roots of your emotional pain, you begin to loosen their hold on you. This process requires patience. Some layers of pain may take time to fully understand and release. There may be moments when you feel like you are moving forward, and others when it seems like you are going backward.
but in reality, you are simply going deeper. It is also important to be gentle with yourself during this journey. You are not expected to have everything figured out. You are learning, exploring, and growing. Every moment of awareness, no matter how small, is a step toward healing. As you begin to understand the roots of your emotional pain, you may notice something important. What once felt overwhelming begins to feel more manageable. What once felt confusing begins to make sense. And what once felt like a permanent part of you begins to feel like something you can work through. This is the beginning of transformation, not by avoiding pain, but by understanding it, not by fighting it, but by listening to it. Because within your pain, there is not only hurt, there is also information, growth, and the possibility of deep healing.
Chapter 4. Awareness, the first step to healing. Healing does not begin with action. It begins with awareness. Before you can change anything within yourself, you must first be able to see it clearly, not as you wish it to be, not as you fear it is, but as it truly is, without distortion, without denial, and without judgment. Awareness is the light that reveals what has been hidden, and without that light, true healing cannot take place. Most of the time, we live on autopilot. We think, feel, and act in ways that are so familiar that we rarely question them. A thought appears, and we believe it. An emotion arises, and we react to it. A situation happens, and we respond in a way that feels automatic. This automatic way of living is not a flaw. It is how the mind has learned to operate efficiently. But it also means that many of our patterns continue without our conscious choice. Awareness interrupts this automatic cycle. It creates a space between what happens and how you respond. In that space, something powerful becomes possible. Choice. Imagine a moment when you feel anger rising within you. Without awareness, the anger takes control. You may say something you later regret, or react in a way that does not truly reflect who you want to be. But with awareness, even for a brief second, you notice the anger as it arises. You feel it, you recognize it, but you do not immediately act on it. That moment of noticing changes everything. This is the essence of awareness, not eliminating your thoughts or emotions, but observing them. You begin to see that you are not your thoughts, and you are not your emotions. You are the one who is aware of them. This distinction may seem subtle, but it is deeply transformative. When you identify completely with your thoughts, every negative idea feels like a truth. When you identify completely with your emotions, every feeling feels permanent and overwhelming. But when you become aware of them, you create distance, and in that distance, you find clarity.
Developing awareness requires practice. It is not something that happens instantly, but something that grows over time. It begins with simple observation. You start to notice your thoughts, what you think about yourself, about others, about your life. You observe your emotional reactions, what triggers them, how they feel in your body, how long they last. You become curious about your inner experience. At first, this may feel unfamiliar. You may realize how quickly your mind moves, how often your thoughts repeat themselves, or how strongly your emotions can influence you. This is not something to be discouraged by. It is something to be grateful for, because what you are seeing is what has always been there. You are simply becoming aware of it for the first time. One of the most important qualities to bring into this process is non-judgment. It is easy to observe your thoughts and immediately label them as good or bad, right or wrong, but judgment closes the door to understanding. Awareness, on the other hand, keeps that door open. When you notice a negative thought, instead of saying, "I shouldn't think this way," you can say, "This is what I am thinking right now." When you feel a difficult emotion, instead of resisting it, you can acknowledge it. "This is what I am feeling."
This simple shift allows you to observe your experience without adding more tension to it. Another important aspect of awareness is presence. To be aware, you must be present. You cannot observe your thoughts if your attention is constantly lost in them. You cannot understand your emotions if you are always trying to escape them. Presence means bringing your attention to this moment, fully, consciously, and without distraction. In a world filled with constant stimulation, presence can feel challenging. Your attention is often pulled in many directions, toward the past, the future, or external distractions. But awareness grows in stillness. Even a few moments of quiet attention can begin to change your relationship with yourself.
You may start by simply noticing your breath, feeling the rhythm of your inhalation and exhalation, observing the sensations in your body, listening to the sounds around you without labeling them. These small practices anchor you in the present moment, making awareness more accessible. As your awareness deepens, you begin to recognize patterns more clearly. You notice how certain thoughts lead to certain emotions, and how those emotions influence your behavior. You start to see the connections between your past experiences and your present reactions. What once felt confusing begins to reveal its structure. With this understanding comes a new kind of power, not the power to control everything, but the power to respond consciously. Instead of being driven by unconscious patterns, you begin to make choices that align with who you truly are and who you want to become. It is important to remember that awareness itself is already a form of healing. You do not need to immediately fix everything you see. The act of observing with clarity and compassion begins to transform your inner world naturally. When something is seen clearly, it can no longer operate in the same hidden way. There will be moments when awareness feels easy and moments when it feels difficult. There may be times when you fall back into old patterns without noticing. This is part of the process. Awareness is not about perfection, it is about returning. Each time you notice, you are strengthening your ability to be present. Over time, you may find that you become less reactive, more patient, and more grounded. Situations that once triggered strong reactions may begin to feel more manageable. You may feel a greater space within yourself, a quiet stability that was always there but hidden beneath layers of unconscious activity. This is the beginning of true change, not forced, not rushed, but natural. It arises from seeing clearly, from understanding deeply, and from being present with yourself in a way you may never have been before. Awareness is not the end of the journey, it is the foundation of it. It is the first step, and also the step you will return to again and again. Because every moment of healing, every moment of growth, begins with one simple act: noticing.
Chapter 5. Letting Go of the Past. One of the most misunderstood aspects of inner healing is the idea of letting go. Many people hear this phrase and assume it means forgetting the past, ignoring what happened, or forcing themselves to move on as quickly as possible. But true letting go is not about erasing your memories or pretending that your experiences did not affect you. It is about releasing the hold that the past has on your present. The past lives in two places, in your memory and in your emotional patterns. While you cannot change what has already happened, you can change how it continues to live within you. Letting go is not about the past itself, it is about your relationship with it. Every experience you have lived carries meaning, and often that meaning was formed at a time when you did not have the awareness you have now. You may have interpreted events in a way that led to certain beliefs about yourself or the world.
Over time, these interpretations became part of your identity, shaping how you think, feel, and behave. For example, a moment of rejection may have turned into a belief that you are not worthy of love. A failure may have become a belief that you are not capable. A painful relationship may have led you to believe that trust is dangerous. These conclusions may have felt true at the time, but they are not absolute truths. They are interpretations. Letting go begins when you are willing to question these interpretations. You begin to see that what happened and what it meant are not the same thing. The event is fixed, but the meaning you gave it can change.
This does not mean denying your pain. On the contrary, true release requires that you acknowledge your pain fully. You allow yourself to feel what you may have avoided, to recognize how certain experiences affected you, and to give yourself the understanding that may have been missing at the time. There is a difference between holding on and remembering. Holding on means repeatedly reliving the emotional charge of the past, allowing it to influence your present in ways that limit you. Remembering, on the other hand, means recognizing what happened without being controlled by it. It means learning from your experiences without becoming defined by them. One of the reasons people struggle to let go is because the past can feel like a part of who they are. It may feel as though releasing it would mean losing a piece of themselves. But in reality, letting go does not take anything away from you. It gives you back the parts of yourself that have been hidden beneath pain, fear, and old patterns. Another reason is the belief that holding on somehow protects you. You may think that by remembering every detail of what hurt you, you will prevent it from happening again. But often the opposite happens. By holding on tightly, you keep the pain active within you, shaping your expectations and influencing your choices in ways that may recreate similar experiences. Letting go is not about becoming unaware, it is about becoming free. Forgiveness is often a part of this process, but it is also widely misunderstood. Forgiveness is not about excusing what happened or saying that it was acceptable. It is not about denying your feelings or forcing yourself to feel something you do not feel. True forgiveness is a decision to release the emotional burden that you carry, not for the other person, but for yourself. You may or may not choose to reconcile with others. That is a separate decision. Forgiveness is an internal process. It is about saying, I choose not to carry this pain any longer.
It is also important to recognize that sometimes the person you need to forgive is yourself. You may hold on to regret, guilt, or shame about things you have done or decisions you have made. You may judge yourself harshly for not knowing then what you know now. But just as you were shaped by your experiences, so were your actions. This does not mean avoiding responsibility, it means understanding it with compassion. You made choices based on the awareness you had at the time. Growth comes from learning, not from endless self-punishment. Letting go of self-judgment is one of the most liberating aspects of healing. When you release the need to constantly criticize yourself, you create space for growth, for change, and for a healthier relationship with who you are. The process of letting go is not instant. It happens gradually, often in layers. You may feel that you have released something only to find that it returns in a different form. This is not failure, it is part of the process. Each time you revisit it with greater awareness, you release a little more. There are moments when letting go feels like relief, and moments when it feels like loss. Even painful experiences can become familiar, and releasing them can feel uncertain. But beyond that uncertainty lies freedom, a lighter way of being, where your past no longer defines your present. As you begin to let go, you may notice changes in how you relate to yourself and others. You may feel less reactive, less guarded, more open.
Situations that once triggered strong emotional responses may begin to feel more neutral. You may find it easier to trust, to express yourself, and to move forward. Letting go does not mean that your past disappears. It means that it no longer controls you. It becomes part of your story, but not the author of your life. This chapter is not asking you to force anything. It is inviting you to begin a process, to gently question what you are holding on to understand why you are holding on to it, and to consider the possibility of releasing it. Because within that release, there is space, and within that space, there is peace. And perhaps, for the first time, there is the freedom to fully live in the present moment.
Chapter 6. Rebuilding Your Inner Self. After awareness, after understanding, and after beginning to let go of what no longer serves you, there comes a quiet but powerful phase in the journey of healing: rebuilding. This is the stage where you do not only release the old, you begin to consciously create the new. Not a new identity based on external expectations, but a renewed connection with your true self. For a long time, much of what shaped you may have been unconscious. Your beliefs, your reactions, your emotional patterns, many of them were formed without your deliberate choice. But now, with awareness, you are no longer living only from what was given to you. You are beginning to choose what you keep, what you transform, and what you leave behind. Rebuilding your inner self is not about becoming someone completely different. It is about returning to who you are beneath fear, conditioning, and past pain. It is about reconnecting with your natural clarity, your inner strength, and your ability to live with intention. One of the first aspects of this rebuilding process is redefining your identity. For many people, identity is closely tied to past experiences. You may have seen yourself as the one who struggles, the one who is not enough, or the one who always fails. These identities often form slowly through repeated thoughts and experiences until they feel like permanent truths. But identity is not fixed. It is shaped by what you repeatedly believe and reinforce. When you begin to question old beliefs, you create space for a new understanding of yourself. You begin to see that you are not your past, not your mistakes, and not your fears. You are something deeper, something that can observe, learn, and grow. This realization allows you to begin forming a new inner narrative. Instead of repeating thoughts that limit you, you start to consciously choose thoughts that support your growth. This does not mean forcing yourself into unrealistic positivity, but rather aligning your thinking with truth and possibility. For example, instead of thinking, "I will never change," you may begin to think, "Change takes time, but I am capable of it." Instead of, "I am not good enough," you may shift toward, "I am learning, growing, and becoming better." These shifts may seem small, but over time, they reshape how you see yourself and how you approach life. Another important part of rebuilding is developing emotional resilience. This does not mean becoming unaffected by life's challenges. It means becoming more stable within yourself so that you can experience emotions without being overwhelmed by them. Emotional resilience grows when you learn to stay present with your feelings without immediately reacting. When you face discomfort instead of avoiding it. When you allow yourself to feel sadness, fear, or frustration without letting those emotions define your entire experience. You begin to understand that emotions come and go. They rise, they peak, and they pass. And within you, there is a steady presence that remains unchanged, the part of you that observes, that understands, that remains grounded even when everything else feels uncertain. Rebuilding also involves setting new boundaries, both with others and with yourself.
In the past, you may have allowed certain behaviors, situations, or relationships that did not align with your well-being. Not because you wanted to suffer, but because you were acting from old patterns, seeking approval, avoiding conflict, or not recognizing your own worth. As you grow, you begin to recognize what is healthy for you and what is not. You learn to say no when something does not feel right. You learn to protect your time, your energy, and your emotional space. Boundaries are not walls, they are expressions of self-respect.
At the same time, rebuilding your inner self requires consistency, not perfection, but steady effort. Small, repeated actions that reinforce the person you are becoming. This may include moments of reflection, conscious breathing, journaling, or simply pausing before reacting. Each time you choose awareness over impulse, you strengthen your new foundation. Each time you respond with clarity instead of reacting from old patterns, you move further away from the past and closer to the person you are becoming. There will be moments when old patterns reappear. Thoughts you believed you had moved beyond may return. Emotions you thought you had released may surface again. This does not mean you have failed. It means you are still in the process of change. Rebuilding is not a straight path. It is a process of reinforcement. Each time you choose differently, even in small ways, you weaken the old and strengthen the new. It is also important to cultivate patience during this phase. Growth takes time. Just as your old patterns were built over years, your new way of being will develop gradually. There is no need to rush or to compare your progress to others. Your journey is your own. As you continue, you may begin to notice a shift in how you experience yourself. You may feel more grounded, more confident,